Amora had always believed that survival was enough, that waking up each morning and making it to nightfall without crumbling counted as victory. She had learned to measure life in small mercies, the rent paid on time, her daughter's fever breaking, the bruises fading before anyone asked questions. She had become an expert at invisible suffering, at carrying weight no one could see. The diner where she worked smelled of burnt coffee and broken promises. The fluorescent lights hummed with the same exhausted frequency as her heartbeat. She moved through her shifts like a ghost haunting her own life, pouring coffee for strangers who never looked up long enough to see her. They never noticed the tremble in her hands or the way she flinched when someone moved too quickly. They saw a waitress. She was so much less than that now, so much more broken than anyone knew. Her daughter, Lily, was 6 years old and believed her mother was magic. She believed that the cramped apartment they lived in was a castle, that the crackers and cheese they ate for dinner were a feast, that tomorrow would always be better than today. Children have that gift, the ability to find light in the smallest spaces. Amara had lost that gift somewhere between the hospital bills and the debt collectors, between the night she ran and the morning she realized she could never run far enough. Before we go on, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. 3 years ago, Amara had been someone else. She'd had a name that felt like hers, a laugh that came easily, a man who promised her the world and delivered only ashes. His name was Marcus, and he had been charming in the way dangerous men often are, smooth-voiced and quick with compliments, the kind of man who made you feel chosen, special, seen. She had loved him with the reckless intensity of someone who didn't know better, who hadn't yet learned that some kinds of love leave scars that never heal. Marcus had debts, the kind that didn't disappear with apologies or payment plans, the kind that followed you into the dark and waited. He had borrowed from the wrong people, made promises he couldn't keep, and when the reckoning came, he ran. He left her holding the bag, or rather, holding their daughter, standing in an apartment stripped bare of everything but the weight of what he owed. The men who came looking for him found her instead. They told her the debt was hers now. $50,000. Blood money. Terror money. Money she would never have. She tried to explain. Tried to reason. Tried to beg. They didn't care. One of them, a man with cold eyes and a voice like gravel, leaned close and told her that debts like this didn't vanish. They transferred. They multiplied. They consumed. He told her she had 6 months. After that, they would take payment another way. He didn't specify what that meant. He didn't need to. The threat lived in the silence between his words. So Amora ran. She took Lily and disappeared into the kind of city where people go to become invisible. She changed her name, dyed her hair, found work in places that didn't ask for references. She learned to move through the world like smoke, present but untouchable, but not really. She stopped making friends, stopped hoping, stopped believing that anything good could last. But debts, she learned, have memories longer than her own. They find you in the places you think you're safe. They whisper your real name when you've almost forgotten it yourself. The diner was busy that night. Friday nights always were. The clatter of plates and the murmur of conversation created a kind of white noise that Amara had learned to hide inside. She was refilling coffee, her mind empty, her body on autopilot, when the door opened and the air in the room changed. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a shift in temperature. It was something older than that. A primal recognition. The way prey knows when a predator has entered the clearing. She looked up. She shouldn't have. She should have kept her head down, kept moving, kept pretending she was no one. But instinct pulled her gaze toward the door, and that's when she saw him. Dante Moetti. She knew the name before she knew the face. Everyone in this city knew the name, even if they pretended not to. Especially if they pretended not to. He was the kind of man mothers warned their daughters about, the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. He owned half the city and controlled the other half. He moved through the world with the quiet certainty of someone who had never been told no. And he was looking directly at her. Not past her. Not through her. At her. Amora's heart stopped. Then it started again. Too fast. Too loud. The coffee pot in her hand trembled. She set it down before it could fall, before it could shatter, before she could give herself away. But it was too late. His eyes had already found hers. Dark eyes, unreadable, steady, and in them she saw something that made her blood turn to ice. Recognition. He knew her. Somehow, impossibly, he knew her. The diner was full of people, but suddenly there was no one else. Just her and him and the terrible distance closing between them. He moved through the room like water, unhurried but inevitable. His men followed, shadows in expensive suits, their presence a silent command. The conversations around them dimmed. The laughter died. People looked down at their plates, suddenly fascinated by their food. No one wanted to be seen noticing. Amora's legs locked. Her breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her body wouldn't obey. She stood frozen, a deer in headlights, as Dante Moetti crossed the diner and stopped in front of her. He was taller than she expected, broader. The photographs didn't do justice to the way he occupied space, the way gravity seemed to bend toward him. His suit was dark and perfectly tailored. His hands were steady. His face was unreadable, all sharp lines and controlled power. But it was his eyes that held her, eyes that saw too much, eyes that remembered. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, studied her, as if confirming something he already knew. Then, in a voice that was low and calm and absolutely final, he said two words that shattered what was left of her life. I remember. The world tilted. Her vision blurred. She wanted to deny it, to pretend she didn't understand, but the truth was written in the way he looked at her. He knew who she was. He knew what she'd been running from. And now, standing in this diner on a Friday night with nowhere left to hide, Amara realized something that made her want to scream. She had been found. Dante turned his head slightly, just enough to address the room without taking his eyes off her. His voice carried, quiet but absolute. Everyone, leave. There was no hesitation, no questions. People stood. They gathered their things. They walked out. Within seconds, the diner was empty except for Amara, Dante, and his men stationed at the door. And then, with a small gesture, Dante dismissed even them. They left without a word. He moved toward the door and turned the lock. The click echoed like a gunshot in the silence. They were alone. Amora's hands were shaking. Her mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, each worse than the last. She wanted to speak, to plead, to explain, but her throat had closed around the words. All she could do was stand there, trembling, as Dante Moetti turned back to face her. You've been running a long time, he said softly. It wasn't a question. She nodded. She couldn't do anything else. From Marcus's debt. Another nod. Her eyes burned. She refused to let the tears fall. Dante stepped closer. Not threatening. Not yet. Just close enough that she could see the way his jaw tightened, the way something almost like anger flickered in his eyes. You shouldn't have had to run, he said. That debt was never yours. Amora blinked. Confusion cut through the fear. What? Marcus made his choices. You didn't. But the men he owed don't care about fair. They only care about collection. Dante's gaze held hers, steady and unrelenting. And now they are closing in. They've found you, Amora. They know where you are. Her knees nearly buckled. How do you? Because I've been watching. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. I've been watching since the moment you disappeared. And now I'm done watching. The fear that had been simmering inside her exploded into full panic. Please, she whispered. Please, I have a daughter. She's just a little girl. She doesn't deserve. No one's going to touch her. Dante's voice cut through her pleading like a blade. No one's going to touch you. Not anymore. Amora stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. Why would you? Because I owe you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning she didn't understand. Dante took another step closer. 10 years ago, you saved my sister's life. You probably don't even remember. You were just a kid yourself, working at that hospital. But she was dying, and you stayed with her when no one else would. You held her hand. You told her she was going to be okay. And she believed you. Amora's breath caught. She did remember. A girl, barely 16, bleeding and terrified. Amora had been volunteering, just trying to help. She'd held the girl's hand and whispered promises she had no right to make. Promises that somehow came true. She lived because you didn't leave her alone in the dark. Dante's voice was softer now, almost gentle. I've been looking for you ever since. To thank you. To repay the debt. But you disappeared. And then, a few weeks ago, I found you. Working here. Hiding. Afraid. His expression hardened. No one who saved my sister's life should ever be afraid again. Amora felt the tears finally break free. They slid down her cheeks in hot, silent streams. I don't understand. You don't have to. Dante reached out and, with surprising gentleness, wiped a tear from her face. His touch was warm, steady. You just have to trust me. Come with me. You and your daughter. I'll keep you safe. I'll clear the debt. I'll make sure no one ever comes looking for you again. It wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in the illusion of choice. Amora looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Not cruelty, not ownership, but certainty. He believed every word he was saying. He believed he could protect her. And maybe, just maybe, he could. But protection, she had learned, always came with a price. What do you want from me? She whispered. Dante smiled. It was a small, sad smile. Nothing you're not willing to give. And in that moment, Amora understood. She was being offered safety, shelter, a way out of the nightmare she'd been living. But it came at the cost of her freedom. She would trade one cage for another, one kind of fear for something else entirely. She thought of Lily, of her daughter's trusting eyes and her belief that tomorrow would be better. She thought of the men who were coming, the debt that would never stop growing, the violence that waited in the shadows. And she made her choice. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Dante nodded once, as if he'd known all along what she would say. Get your daughter. Pack what you need. I'll have someone bring you to me. He turned and unlocked the door. His men reappeared as if they'd been waiting just out of sight. And as Dante Moetti walked out of the diner and into the night, Amara felt the weight of her old life fall away. She didn't know what came next. She didn't know if she'd made the right choice. But she knew, with terrible certainty, that her life had just changed forever. The cage door had opened, and she had stepped inside willingly. The apartment felt smaller when she returned to it that night. Amara stood in the doorway, looking at the life she'd built from scraps and desperation, and felt nothing. No attachment, no regret, just a hollow acknowledgement that this place had never been home. It had only been a hiding spot. And hiding spots, she now understood, were never meant to last. Lily was asleep on the couch, curled beneath a thin blanket, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. She looked impossibly small, impossibly innocent. Amara knelt beside her and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. Lily stirred but didn't wake. She smiled in her sleep, dreaming of things that didn't hurt, things that didn't chase you. Amara wondered how long that innocence would last. How long before Lily understood that the world was full of wolves dressed as men, that safety was a myth, that love could be the most dangerous thing you ever felt. She hoped the answer was forever. She feared it was soon. She packed quickly, mechanically. There wasn't much to take. Clothes that had been worn thin. A few toys Lily couldn't live without. A photograph of the two of them, taken on Lily's 4th birthday, back when Amara still believed they might outrun the past. She tucked it into her bag and zipped it shut. The knock on the door came exactly when Dante said it would. Midnight. Precise. Inevitable. Amora opened the door to find a woman standing in the hallway. Tall, elegant, with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. She wore a black coat and heels that made no sound on the worn carpet. Her expression was unreadable, professional. She looked at Amara the way a doctor might look at a patient, assessing, clinical, devoid of judgment. "I'm Elena," the woman said. Her voice was smooth, cultured. "Mr. Moetti sent me." Amara nodded. She didn't know what else to do. Elena's gaze shifted to Lily, still sleeping on the couch. "Is she a heavy sleeper?" "Usually." "Good." Elena stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. She moved through the apartment with practiced efficiency, scanning the space, noting exits, evaluating risks. When she was satisfied, she turned back to Amara. "We'll take my car. It's safer, less conspicuous." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere you'll be protected." Elena's expression softened, just slightly. "You'll understand when we get there." Amara lifted Lily into her arms. Her daughter barely stayed, just nestled closer, trusting even in sleep. That trust broke something in Amara's chest. She followed Elena out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the cold night air. The car was black and sleek, the kind of vehicle that cost more than Amara had earned in her entire life. Elena opened the back door and gestured for Amara to get in. She did, cradling Lily against her chest, and Elena closed the door with a soft, final click. The drive was long and silent. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows. Amara watched them, trying to memorize the route, trying to keep track of where they were going. But the turns came too fast, the streets too unfamiliar. Within 20 minutes, she was lost. Elena drove with calm precision, her eyes on the road, her hand steady. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions, didn't offer reassurances. She simply drove, and Amara simply sat, holding her daughter, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down on her chest. They left the city behind. The buildings gave way to trees. The street lights disappeared. The road became narrower, darker, swallowed by the kind of wilderness that made you feel small. Amara's pulse quickened. She wanted to ask where they were going, wanted to demand answers, but fear kept her silent. Fear and the knowledge that it was too late to turn back now. The house appeared like a mirage. One moment there was only darkness and trees, and the next there were gates, iron, tall, imposing. They opened without a sound, and Elena drove through. The driveway was long, lined with lanterns that cast soft golden light on the gravel path, and at the end of it stood the house. No, not a house, an estate. Amara's breath caught. The building was massive, all stone and glass and quiet wealth. It looked like something out of a dream, or a nightmare, beautiful and cold, safe and suffocating. She thought of fairy tales, of castles and captive girls, and wondered which role she was meant to play. Elena parked and got out. She opened Amara's door and gestured for her to follow. Amara did, her legs unsteady, her arms tight around Lily. The night air was cool and smelled of pine. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath their feet. The front door opened before they reached it. A man stood in the doorway, older, gray-haired, dressed in a suit that suggested he was more than just staff. He nodded at Elena and stepped aside to let them enter. The interior was as stunning as the exterior. High ceilings, dark wood, art that looked like it belonged in museums. Everything was immaculate, controlled, deliberate. It was the kind of place where chaos wasn't allowed, where disorder was corrected before it could take root. Amara felt like an intruder, like she was tracking mud into a cathedral. Elena led her through the house, down a hallway, up a staircase, into a wing that felt separate from the rest, quieter, more intimate. She stopped at a door and pushed it open. "This is yours," she said simply. The room was larger than Amara's entire apartment. A bed dominated the space, covered in soft white linens. There was a sitting area, a fireplace, windows that overlooked the grounds. A door on the far wall led to what Amara assumed was a bathroom. Everything was pristine, untouched, waiting. "There's a room for your daughter next door," Elena continued. fully furnished. Safe. Dante made show of it. Amora felt tears prick her eyes. She didn't know why. Relief, maybe. Or fear. Or the strange, disorienting feeling of being cared for by someone who had no reason to care. She looked at Elena, searching for answers in her calm, unreadable face. Why is he doing this? Elena's expression didn't change. Because he can. Because he wants to. Because in his world, debts are paid. Always. She paused, then added, "Get some rest. Tomorrow, things will make more sense." Amora doubted that, but she nodded anyway. Elena left, closing the door softly behind her. Amora stood in the center of the room, still holding Lily, and felt the silence close and around her. She carried her daughter to the bed and laid her down gently. Lily sighed and curled into the pillows, still lost in sleep, still believing the world was kind. Amora sat on the edge of the bed and let herself breathe. Really breathe. For the first time in years, she wasn't listening for footsteps in the hall, wasn't checking the locks, wasn't waiting for the knock that would end everything. She was, for this moment, safe. But safety, she had learned, was another kind of trap. She thought of Dante, of the way he'd looked at her in the diner. Not with lust, not with cruelty, but with something quieter, something that felt almost like tenderness. He'd called it a debt, but debts were meant to be repaid and forgotten. This didn't feel like something that would be forgotten. Amora stood and walked to the window. The ground stretched out before her, vast and beautiful and empty. The gates were far in the distance, barely visible. She wondered if they were meant to keep people out or keep her in. Probably both. She pressed her hand against the glass, feeling the cold seep into her skin. Outside, the night was still. Inside, her heart raced. She had made a choice. She had stepped through the door. And now, standing in this beautiful, lonely room, she understood what she'd really done. She'd traded one cage for another. And this one, she suspected, would be much harder to escape. If this story has already found a place in your heart, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more stories that stay long after they end. Morning came too quickly. Amara woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of Lily's laughter. She bolted upright, heart pounding, before she remembered where she was. She rushed to the adjoining room and found Lily sitting on the floor, surrounded by toys she didn't recognize, talking to a woman Amara had never seen before. The woman looked up and smiled. "Good morning. I'm Maria. I take care of the household." She was middle-aged, warm-faced, the kind of person who made you feel like everything would be okay. "Your daughter is delightful." Lily looked up, beaming. "Mama, look, there's a dollhouse." Amora's chest tightened. She forced a smile. "I see, baby." Maria stood, brushing off her skirt. "Mr. Moretti asked me to make sure you both had everything you needed. Breakfast is ready whenever you are. And—" She hesitated, then added gently, "He'd like to see you, when you're ready." Amora's pulse quickened. "Where's he?" "His study. I'll take you when you're ready." Amora nodded. She wasn't ready. She didn't think she ever would be. But she got dressed anyway, in clothes that had been laid out for her, soft, expensive, not hers. She braided her hair and checked her reflection in the mirror. She looked like a stranger, someone playing a role in someone else's story. Maria led her through the house, down corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past rooms that whispered of lives she couldn't imagine. They stopped at a heavy wooden door. Maria knocked once, then opened it. "Ms. Amara," she announced softly, then stepped aside. Amara walked into the study. It was all dark wood and leather, shelves lined with books, a desk that looked like it had witnessed 1,000 decisions. And behind that desk, looking up from a stack of papers, was Dante. He stood when he saw her, a gesture of respect that felt out of place. "Amora, thank you for coming." She didn't know how to respond. Thank you felt wrong. This wasn't a social call. Dante gestured to a chair. Please, sit. She did. Her hands were shaking. She folded them in her lap. Dante sat as well, his gaze steady on her. I imagine you have questions. Thousands. Ask them. Amara swallowed. What do you want from me? Nothing you're not willing to give, he repeated. The same words from last night. They still didn't answer anything. That's not an answer. Dante's expression didn't change. I want you to be safe. I want your daughter to grow up without fear. I want you to stop running. He paused. And I want you to let me protect you. Why? I told you why. Because of your sister. Amara's voice was sharper now, edged with frustration. Because I held her hand once, years ago. That doesn't explain this. Any of this. Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her. Do you believe in debts, Amara? Real debts, the kind that live in your bones. I know more about debt than I ever wanted to. Then you understand. My sister lived because you didn't let her die alone. That's a debt I can never fully repay. But I can try. His voice softened. You saved someone I love. Now let me save you. Amara felt tears threaten again. She blinked them back. And what happens when the debt is paid? When you've saved me and cleared Marcus's mess and kept us safe? What then? Dante's jaw tightened. For the first time, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Something he didn't want her to see. Then you'll be free. But even as he said it, Amara heard the lie. Not in his words. In the silence that followed them. Freedom, she realized, wasn't part of this bargain. Not really. But survival was. And right now, that was all she could afford to care about. Days blurred into one another, each one softer than the last. Amara learned the rhythms of the estate, the quiet efficiency of the staff, the way meals appeared without her asking, the soundlessness that came from having too much space and too much money. It was a world that operated on invisible rails, controlled by forces she couldn't see, guided by Dante's will in ways both subtle and absolute. Lily adapted faster than Amara expected. Children always did. Within a week, her daughter was running through the gardens, laughing with Maria, creating elaborate stories about the estate being an enchanted kingdom. She didn't ask when they were going home. Maybe she didn't remember what home had been. Maybe that was a mercy. Amara, on the other hand, couldn't settle. She wandered the halls like a ghost, exploring spaces she wasn't sure she was allowed to enter, touching things that felt too expensive to touch. She found a library that made her heart ache, floor-to-ceiling books, leather-bound and ancient. She found a music room with a piano that no one played. She found gardens that stretched for acres, meticulously maintained, hauntingly beautiful. And everywhere, she felt Dante's presence, even when he wasn't there. He was careful with her. That was the strange part. She'd expected demands. Control. The kind of possessiveness that came with men who held power. But Dante gave her space. He didn't confine her to her room or dictate her schedule. He didn't ask invasive questions or make her feel like a prisoner. But she wasn't free either. There were guards, always. Polite men who nodded when she passed but never quite looked away. There were cameras, discreet but present. There were protocols she didn't fully understand, certain areas she wasn't supposed to enter, certain times when the staff became more vigilant. She was safe, protected, isolated, and slowly, terrifyingly, she began to accept it. Dante joined them for dinner most nights. He sat at the head of the long table, and Amara sat to his right, and Lily chatted between bites about her day. He listened to her daughter with a patience that surprised Amara. He asked questions, remembered details, made Lily feel important. He was good with children. That shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. She's brilliant, Dante said one evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed. He and Amara stood in the hallway, the house settling into its nightly silence. She has your strength. Amara didn't know what to say to that. She has her own strength. I just try not to break it. Dante looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment she saw something unguarded in his expression. You didn't break. After everything. You didn't break. You don't know that. I do. He stepped closer. Not threatening. Just present. You're still here. Still fighting. That's not broken. That's steel. Amora's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that she'd broken 1,000 times and just learned to hide the pieces. But the way he looked at her made the words die in her throat. Why do you care? She whispered. Dante didn't answer immediately. He just held her gaze, and in the silence between them, something shifted. Something neither of them acknowledged, but both of them felt. Because I'm tired of watching people I care about suffer, he said finally, and because you deserve better than what life gave you. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was just truth, spoken quietly, in the dark. And Amora felt something inside her crack open. Just a little. Just enough to let the light in. A week passed. Then 2. Amora stopped counting days and started measuring time in other ways. In the moments Lily laughed. In the nights she slept without waking in terror. In the conversations with Dante that stretched longer each evening. He told her about his sister, Isabella. How she'd been caught in the crossfire of a war Dante had started but couldn't control. How she'd almost died because of his choices. How he'd spent years building his empire into something strong enough that no one would ever threaten his family again. I didn't want power for power's sake, he said one night, sitting across from her in the library. The fire crackled between them. The brandy in his glass caught the light. I wanted it so that the people I loved would never be vulnerable again. Did it work? Amora asked. Dante's smile was bitter. Power protects, but it also isolates. The stronger I became, the fewer people I could trust, the fewer people who could get close. He looked at her. You get lonely at the top, even when you're surrounded by people. Amora understood that. She'd been lonely her entire life, even when she'd been with Marcus, even when she'd been surrounded by the noise of the city. Loneliness wasn't about being alone. It was about not being seen. And Dante, she realized, saw her. If you've ever felt torn between fear and love, you'll understand her. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Your support keeps stories like this alive. One afternoon, Amara found Dante in the garden. He was standing by the fountain, staring at the water, lost in thought. She almost turned back, not wanting to intrude, but he looked up before she could leave. Walk with me, he said. It wasn't a command, just an invitation. They walked in silence at first, the gravel crunching beneath their feet, the afternoon sun filtering through the trees. The estate felt endless, a world unto itself. Amara wondered if she would ever see the gates again. Wondered if she wanted to. Do you miss it? Dante asked suddenly. Your old life. Amara considered the question. I miss the idea of it. The idea that I could be normal. That I could just exist without looking over my shoulder. She glanced at him. But no, I don't miss the fear. I don't miss the running. Good. Dante stopped walking and turned to face her. Because I won't let you go back to that. Ever. There was something in his voice. Something possessive. Not cruel. Just absolute. Amara's pulse quickened. What if I want to leave? Do you? She should have said yes. Should have asserted her independence. Her autonomy. But the word wouldn't come. Because the truth was, she didn't know. She didn't know what she wanted in Amor. Safety had always felt temporary, conditional. But hey, with Dante, it felt solid, real, and that terrified her more than anything else. I don't know, she admitted. Dante nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. Then stay, until you do. It sounded reasonable. Fair. But Amora heard the unspoken truth beneath it. Stay until you realize you can't leave. Stay until you forget what freedom felt like. Stay until this becomes home and I become necessary. And the most terrifying part was that she could feel it happening already. That night, she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence. She thought about Marcus, about the debt that had brought her here. She thought about Dante, about the way he looked at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. She thought about the cage she'd stepped into willingly, and she wondered if the door was still open, or if it had locked behind her the moment she'd agreed to come. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, her heart whispered questions she didn't want to answer. Was this captivity? Or was this Kay? Was she trapped? Or was she finally, impossibly, safe? And did it even matter anymore? The estate had a heartbeat. Amara learned to feel it in the quiet hours. The way the staff moved with synchronized precision. The way certain doors remained always locked. The way conversations stopped when she entered certain rooms. It was a living thing, this house, and it kept secrets the way bodies kept blood, hidden, essential, dangerous if exposed. She began to notice the men who came and went. Always at night. Always escorted by Dante or his most trusted guards. They wore expensive suits and carried themselves with a kind of confidence that came from never being told no. They didn't acknowledge her when they passed. She was furniture to them, scenery, unimportant, but she saw them, and she understood. Dante wasn't just wealthy. He wasn't just powerful. He was connected to things she'd spent years trying to avoid. Things that operated in shadows. Things that broke people who asked too many questions. She should have been afraid. Maybe she was. But fear had become so familiar that she'd learned to carry it like a second skin. One evening, she heard shouting, muffled but unmistakable, coming from somewhere deep in the house, in the wings she'd been told, politely but firmly, were off limits. She stood in her doorway, listening, her pulse racing. The shouting stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was worse. The next morning, one of the guards had a bruised jaw. He didn't meet her eyes at breakfast. Amara wanted to ask Dante what had happened, but she didn't, because asking questions meant acknowledging truths she wasn't ready to face. And maybe, she thought, it was easier to live in the beautiful lie than confront the ugly reality. Lily was thriving. That was the strange mercy of it all. Her daughter had never been happier. She had space to run. She had Maria, who doted on her like a grandmother. She had toys and books and safety. She had stopped having nightmares, stopped flinching at loud noises, stopped asking when they were leaving. Amara watched her daughter bloom and felt something inside her chest twist. Relief and guilt braided together until she couldn't tell them apart. She had given Lily safety. But at what cost? And when would that bill come due? Dante found her one afternoon in the music room. She was sitting at the piano, not playing, just staring at the keys. She hadn't heard him enter, didn't know how long he'd been watching. "Do you play?" he asked. She shook her head. "I always wanted to learn. Never had the time, or the money, or the—" She trailed off. "The quiet. I could arrange for lessons." Amara looked at him. He stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun, and for a moment he didn't look dangerous. Just a man offering something kind. "You don't have to do that." "I know." He stepped into the room. "But I want to." That phrase again. "I want to." As if his wanting was reason enough. As if the world bent to accommodate his desires because it always had. Why? The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Why do you keep doing this? The room, the clothes, the safety, now piano lessons. What do you want from me, Dante?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed the room and sat beside her on the piano bench, close enough that she could feel his warmth, close enough that leaving would require deliberate effort. "I want you to stop looking at me like I'm going to hurt you," he said quietly. Amara's breath caught. "I don't." "You do. Every time I walk into a room. Every time I get too close. You flinch. You prepare. Like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop." His voice was soft but raw, honest in a way she hadn't expected. "I'm not him," Amora. I'm not Marcus. I'm not going to use you and leave you. I'm not going to hurt you. Then what are you going to do? Dante turned to face her. His eyes, dark and unflinching, held hers. I'm going to keep you, if you'll let me. The words hung between them like a confession, not a threat, not a promise, just truth, laid bare. Amora's heart pounded. Keep me, she repeated, like a possession. No. Dante's jaw tightened, like something precious, something I won't let the world destroy. He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, devastating. You think this is captivity. Maybe it is. But I'd rather you be captive here, alive and whole, than free out there and broken. That's not your choice to make. Isn't it? His hand lingered near her face. You came here willingly. You stay willingly. The door isn't locked, Amora. You could leave tomorrow if you wanted. But you won't. And we both know why. She wanted to argue, to deny it. But he was right. The door wasn't locked. She wasn't chained. She could walk out, take Lily, disappear again. But she wouldn't. Because out there, the debt was still waiting. The men who wanted payment were still searching. And hey, in this beautiful cage, she and Lily were safe. I hate that you're right, she whispered. Dante's expression softened. I know. He stood then, leaving her sitting at the piano, and walked to the door. He paused in the threshold and looked back at her. For what it's worth, I wish things were different. I wish you'd come here because you wanted to, not because you had to. Amora watched him leave, her hands trembling in her lap. She looked down at the piano keys and pressed one note. It rang out, clear and lonely, into the silence. She played it again, and again, a single note, a single sound, the only thing she could control. That night, Amora couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She thought about Dante's words. I'm going to keep you, not as a threat, as a promise, as if being kept was somehow better than being free. Maybe it was. Maybe freedom was overrated when freedom meant running forever. She got up and walked to the window. The moon was full, casting silver light over the grounds. In the distance, she could see the gates. They looked smaller from here, less imposing, almost inviting. She could leave, right now. She could wake Lily, pack what little they'd brought, and walk out those gates. Dante had said it himself. The door wasn't locked. But then what? Back to the diner? Back to the fear? Back to looking over her shoulder every second, waiting for Marcus's debt to catch up with them? Or stay here, in the safety, in the warmth, in the strange, confusing orbit of a man who looked at her like she mattered? Amora pressed her forehead against the glass and closed her eyes. She was so tired, tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of carrying weight that was never hers to begin with. Maybe Dante was right. Maybe this wasn't captivity. Maybe it was mercy. Or maybe that was just what she needed to believe to survive. If your heart's racing too, take a breath. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more unforgettable love stories. The next morning, Amora made a decision. If she was going to stay, if she was going to let Dante protect her, then she needed to understand what that protection cost. She needed to see the truth, not just the beautiful surface. She found him in his study, bent over paperwork, his expression tight with concentration. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. Amora, is everything? Show me, she said. Dante set down his pen. Show you what? The truth. What you do. Who you are. I need to know what I'm accepting by staying here. Dante studied her for a long moment. Then he stood and walked around the desk. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You don't want to know, he said quietly. Yes, I do. Knowing won't make you feel safer. It'll make you feel complicit. I already feel complicit. Her voice was steady, stronger than she felt. I'm living in your house, eating your food, letting you protect my daughter. I'm already part of this, Dante. So show me. All of it. He searched her face, looking for doubt, for fear. She didn't give him either. Finally, he nodded. All right, but don't say I didn't warn you. He led her through the house, down corridors she'd never walked, through doors that required codes to open. They descended a staircase that seemed to spiral down forever. The air grew cooler. The light dimmed. They stopped at a heavy door. Dante paused, his hand on the handle. Last chance to turn back. Amora shook her head. I need to see. He opened the door. The room beyond was massive, underground, filled with monitors showing security feeds from all over the city. Men worked at computers, tracking movements, analyzing data, coordinating operations. It looked like a command center, which, Amora realized, was exactly what it was. Dante moved through the room with easy authority. People nodded to him, reported status updates. He responded with brief instructions, his voice calm, controlled. This was his world, not the beautiful estate above. This. He stopped at a large screen displaying a map covered in red and blue markers. Every red marker is a threat, he explained. Rivals, enemies, people who want what I have or want me gone. Every blue marker is one of mine. Security, assets, allies. He pointed to a cluster of red near the edge of the city. These are the men who held Marcus's debt. The ones who were looking for you. Amora's blood ran cold. Whoa. They are not looking anymore. Dante's voice was flat. Final. I made it clear you're under my protection. That anyone who comes near you or your daughter answers to me. What did you do? Dante turned to face her. What I had to. Amora wanted to press, to demand details, but the look in his eyes stopped her. She understood, suddenly, what protection meant in his world. It meant violence. It meant power wielded without mercy. It meant ensuring threats were eliminated, not negotiated with. Did you kill them? She whispered. No. His expression didn't change. But I made sure they understood what would happen if they tried to collect. Some lessons require emphasis. Amora felt sick, not because she was horrified, but because part of her, a dark, exhausted part, was grateful. These men had terrorized her, had made her run, had stolen years of her life, and Dante had stopped them, had made them afraid. You're wondering if that makes you a bad person, Dante said quietly, being glad that violence protected you. She nodded, unable to speak. It doesn't. He stepped closer. It makes you human. Survival isn't pretty, Amora. And neither is justice. Not the real kind. They stood in the control room, surrounded by monitors and the quiet hum of machinery, and Amora felt the last of her illusions crumble. This was who Dante was. A man who built empires in shadows, who protected what was his with absolute force, who operated by rules the rest of the world pretended didn't exist. And she was choosing to stay with him. Not because she was naive, not because she didn't understand, but because in his world, she and Lily were safe. And safety, she had learned, was worth more than moral purity. Thank you, she said quietly, for showing me. Dante's expression softened. Do you regret it? Knowing? Amora thought about it. Really thought. No, she said finally. I needed to see. To understand. She met his eyes. I'm not afraid of you, Dante. I'm afraid of what it means that I'm not afraid of you. He smiled. A small, sad smile. That makes two of us. He led her back upstairs, back to the light and warmth of the estate above. But something had shifted between them. An understanding, an acceptance. She knew what he was now, and she was staying anyway. The cage had never been about locked doors. It had been about choice, and she had made hers. Time moved differently after that day. Slower, heavier, weighted with meaning Amora couldn't quite name. She stopped measuring her life in exits and started measuring it in moments. In the way Dante's hand would brush hers when he passed her the morning paper. In the sound of his voice calling Lily's name when he came home in the evenings. In the quiet hours they spent together after her daughter was asleep, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other in increments. She was falling. She knew it, felt it happening in real time and couldn't stop it, didn't want to stop it, which was perhaps the most dangerous thing of all. Dante never pushed. That was what undid her. He never demanded more than she was willing to give. Never crossed lines she hadn't drawn. He was patient in a way that felt unnatural for a man used to taking what he wanted. As if she was different. As if she mattered enough to wait for. They had dinner together every night. Lily would sit between them, chattering about her day, and Dante would listen with genuine interest. He remembered everything she told him, asked follow-up questions, made her feel important, and Amara would watch them, this impossibly powerful man and her innocent daughter, and feel something in her chest crack open a little more. "He's good with her," Maria said one afternoon. They were in the kitchen, Amara helping with dinner preparations even though Maria insisted it wasn't necessary. Mr. Moetti. He's always wanted children of his own. Amara's hand stilled over the vegetables she was chopping. Why doesn't he have them? Maria's expression grew distant. His world isn't kind to families. He's seen what happens when the people you love become leverage, when enemies use them to hurt you. She looked at Amara. That's why he keeps the people he cares about close, protected, hidden from view. Is that what I am? Amora asked quietly. Someone he cares about? Maria smiled. What do you think? Amora didn't answer, because she knew. She'd known for weeks, maybe longer. She saw it in the way Dante looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. The way his jaw tightened when she mentioned her old life. The way he'd move closer when they were in the same room, as if proximity to her was magnetic, inevitable. He cared, and that care was becoming harder to distinguish from something else. Something deeper. One night, a storm rolled in. Thunder shook the windows. Rain lashed against the glass. Lily was frightened, clinging to Amara, unable to sleep. So Amara carried her downstairs, looking for distraction, and found Dante in the library. He looked up from his book, concern immediate in his eyes. Is she all right? Scared of the storm, Amara said. I thought maybe if we weren't alone. Come here. Dante set his book aside and gestured to the couch. Both of you. They settled beside him. Lily curled into Amara's lap, and Amara found herself leaning into Dante's warmth without meaning to. He didn't comment on it, just wrapped one arm around her shoulders, solid and steady, and used his free hand to smooth Lily's hair. You know what I do when I'm afraid of storms? He asked Lily softly. She shook her head, peeking up at him. I listen for the quiet between the thunder. That's when you can hear the world breathing, taking a rest, getting ready to be loud again. But in that quiet, you're safe. The storm can't touch you there. Lily considered this seriously. Then she whispered, Will you listen with me? Always. They sat like that, the three of them, listening to the storm rage outside while the library stayed warm and safe. And in the quiet between thunder, Amara felt something settle inside her, something that had been restless and afraid for so long. She looked at Dante, found him already looking at her. Their eyes met, and in that moment, she saw everything he'd been hiding. The loneliness, the longing, the careful, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she would choose to stay not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And Amara realized, with startling clarity, that she did want to. Not just for safety, not just for Lily, but for this, for him, for the way he made her feel seen and valuable and worth protecting, for the way he was gentle with her daughter and patient with her fears and willing to wait until she was ready. She was falling in love with Dante Moetti, and there was no going back from that. Lily fell asleep in her arms. Amara should have taken her back to bed, should have put distance between herself and this moment. But she didn't move, didn't want to. And Dante, as if sensing her hesitation, pulled her closer. "Stay," he whispered, "just a little longer." So she did. She stayed in the circle of his arm, listening to the storm, feeling her daughter's heartbeat against her chest and Dante's steady breathing beside her. And for the first time in years, Amara felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Peace. The storm passed. Morning came. Life continued. But something between them had shifted, and they both felt it. Dante started finding excuses to be near her, offering to walk with her in the gardens, joining her in the library, sitting beside her at breakfast even though he usually took his coffee alone in his study. He never pushed, never demanded, but his presence became constant, comforting, necessary. Amara found herself seeking him out too, asking his opinion on small things, telling him about her day, laughing at his dry humor. She learned that he was funny when he let his guard down, that he had strong opinions about books and wine, that he could be surprisingly soft when he thought no one was watching. She learned that beneath the dangerous exterior was a man who was lonely, who had built walls so high he'd forgotten how to let anyone in, who wanted connection so badly he'd almost convinced himself he didn't need it. She understood that. She'd done the same thing. One evening, she found him on the terrace, staring out at the grounds. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and amber. He didn't hear her approach. She stood beside him, and they watched the light fade together. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Dante was quiet for a moment. Then, "How strange it is to have something you didn't know you wanted, and how terrifying it is to want to keep it." Amora's breath caught. "Dante." He turned to face her. "I told myself this was about debt, about repayment, about doing the right thing." His voice was low, rough, but it's not. Not anymore. Maybe it never was. "What is it about?" He reached out and cupped her face in his hand. His touch was gentle, reverent. "You. Just you." Amora's heart pounded. She should pull away. She'd remind him that this was complicated, that she was still broken, that loving her was dangerous in ways he didn't understand. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of me. Of this. Of wanting this. Of what happens when I let myself need you and it all falls apart." Dante's thumb brushed across her cheek. "Then don't let it fall apart. Stay. Not because you have to. Because you want to. Because this," he gestured between them, at the space that had somehow become sacred, "is worth being afraid for." Amora closed her eyes. She thought of all the times she'd been hurt, all the times she'd trusted and been betrayed, all the reasons she should say no, should protect herself, should run. But she was tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of denying herself the one thing she'd wanted her entire life, someone who saw her and stayed anyway. She opened her eyes and looked at Dante, really looked, at the man who had saved her, who had protected her daughter, who had been patient and gentle and everything Marcus had never been. "Okay," she whispered. Dante's expression shifted. Hope, raw and unguarded, flooded his face. "Okay. I'll stay. Not because I have to. Because I want to." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her like she was precious, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. And Amora let herself be held. Let herself feel safe. Let herself, for the first time, believe that maybe this time, love wouldn't end in ashes. Before we close this chapter, take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Every small gesture helps the next story find its way to you. But even as she stood in Dante's arms, feeling his heart beat against hers, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. Nothing this good lasts. Nothing this perfect survives. And the world they lived in, his world, didn't forgive happiness. It would come for them. Eventually. It always did. But for now, in this moment, with the sun setting and Dante's arms around her and her daughter safe inside, Amara let herself believe in maybe. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe love could survive. Maybe she deserved this after all. Even if maybe was a lie, it was a beautiful one, and she was willing to live in it for as long as the world allowed. They didn't speak about what had changed between them. They didn't need to. It lived in the space between their words, in the way the hands found each other across the dinner table, in the lingering looks that lasted just a moment too long. It was understanding without declaration, commitment without ceremony. Amara woke each morning to sunlight and the knowledge that Dante was somewhere in the house, working, protecting, existing in her orbit. That knowledge had become a comfort she hadn't known she needed. She would find him in his study most mornings, already awake, already at work. He would look up when she entered, and his entire expression would soften in a way that made her chest ache. "Coffee?" he'd ask, even though he already knew the answer. "Please." And he would pour it himself, measuring cream and sugar the way she liked, and hand it to her with a touch that lingered just a second longer than necessary. These small rituals became sacred, evidence of care, proof that she mattered. Lily started calling him Dante instead of Mr. Moetti. He never asked her to. It just happened naturally, the way children adapt to new normals faster than adults ever can. Amara watched them together, watched him teach Lily to play chess, watched him carry her on his shoulders through the gardens, watched him read her bedtime stories in a voice gentler than Amara had thought possible, and felt her resistance crumble completely. This man, this dangerous man, loved her daughter, not because he had to, not because it served some purpose, but genuinely, completely, and that love, Amara realized, extended to her as well. "She asked me today if you're her father," Maria mentioned one afternoon. They were folding laundry, the domestic simplicity of the task somehow grounding. "Miss Lily." She wanted to know. Amora's hand stilled. "What did you tell her?" "That she should ask you." Maria smiled softly, but I think she already knows the answer in her heart. Amora thought about that conversation all day, about what it meant, about the family they were becoming without ever deciding to become one, about how Dante had stepped into the role of father without being asked, without hesitation, as if loving Lily was as natural as breathing. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Amara found Dante on the terrace again. He seemed to gravitate toward that spot when he needed to think. He stood with his hands in his pockets, staring out at the darkening sky, lost in thoughts he rarely shared. "Lily asked Maria if you're her father," Amara said quietly, joining him at the railing. Dante tensed. "What did you tell her?" "I haven't told her anything yet. I wanted to talk to you first." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "What do you want me to be to her?" Amora looked at him, at this man who had somehow become essential. "What do you want to be?" "Everything." The word came out rough, honest. "I want to be everything to both of you, but I don't want to overstep. I don't want to replace anyone or claim something that isn't mine to claim." "Marcus was never her father," Amora said firmly. "He was a name on a birth certificate. Nothing more. He left before she could even remember him. You," her voice caught, "you've been more of a father to her in 2 months than he ever was." Dante turned to face her fully. "And what am I to you, Amora?" The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Amora could have deflected, could have made a joke or changed the subject, but she was tired of hiding, tired of pretending this wasn't what it was. "You're the person I think about when I wake up," she said softly. "The person I look for in every room. The person who made me believe I could be safe again. She took a breath. "You're everything too." Dante closed the distance between them in 2 steps. He cupped her face in both hands, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. "I love you," he said. Simple, definite. "I've loved you since the moment you looked at me in that diner and I saw how strong you were, how brave. I love you, and I love Lily, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you both know it." Amora felt tears slide down her cheeks. Happy tears. disbelieving tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I didn't want to. I tried not to. But I do. I love you, Dante." He kissed her then, soft and slow and sure, a promise sealed without words. And Amora kissed him back, letting herself fall completely, trusting that he would catch her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. Amora laughed, the sound watery and overwhelmed. "Ah, you serious?" "Completely. Marry me. Let me be your husband. Let me be Lily's father. Let me give you both my name and every protection that comes with it. Let me love you for the rest of our lives." It was insane. They'd only known each other for 2 months. But Amora had learned that time didn't measure love. Intensity did. And what she felt for Dante was more real than anything she'd felt in her entire life. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes." Dante kissed her again, deeper this time, and Amara felt the last of her walls crumble. She was his. He was hers. And whatever came next, they would face it together. They told Lily the next morning. She was eating pancakes, syrup smeared across her chin, when Dante knelt beside her chair. "Lily," he said gently, "I need to ask you something important." She looked at him with wide, trusting eyes. "Okay. How would you feel if I married your mom? If I became your dad?" Lily's face lit up like the sun. "Really? You want to be my dad?" "More than anything." She threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him over. "Yes. Yes, yes, yes." Dante held her, his eyes closed, his expression one of pure gratitude. And Amora watched them, her heart so full it hurt. This was what love was supposed to feel like. The wedding was small, private, just them and Maria and a few of Dante's most trusted people. They stood in the garden under the same trees where Amora had first started to feel safe, and they promised themselves to each other with words that were simple and true. Dante slid a ring onto her finger, platinum with a single diamond that caught the light, and Amara felt the weight of it like an anchor. Something to hold on to. Something real. "You're mine now," Dante whispered against her lips when they kissed. "And I'm yours. For better or worse. For all of it." "For all of it," Amara echoed. That night, after Lily was asleep and the house had settled into its quiet rhythm, Dante carried Amara to their room. Not hers anymore, but theirs, shared and sacred. He made love to her with a gentleness that broke her apart and put her back together. Every touch was a declaration. Every kiss was a promise. And Amara gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his hand drawing lazy patterns on her back. She could hear his heartbeat. Steady. Sure. Home. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered into the dark. "A real family. Real love. I thought that was for other people. Not for me." Dante's arms tightened around her. "You deserve everything good in this world, Amora. Every beautiful thing. And I'm going to spend my life making sure you have it." She believed him. Against all odds, against all logic, she believed him. But happiness, Amora had learned, was fragile. It could shatter so easily. And in the world Dante lived in, threats didn't announce themselves. They came in the dark. They waited for moments of vulnerability. They struck when you finally let your guard down. And somewhere, beyond the gates of that perfect sanctuary, something was waiting. Neither of them knew it yet. Neither of them felt the storm gathering. But it was coming. It always did. And when it arrived, it would test everything they'd built, everything they'd promised, everything they believed about love and safety and whether either could truly last in a world built on violence and power. For now, though, they had this moment, this perfect, fragile present, and they held on to it with both hands, hoping it would be enough, praying it would last, knowing, somewhere deep down, that nothing ever did. 3 weeks of happiness. That's what they had. 21 days of waking up beside each other, of breakfast as a family, of Lily calling Dante Dad with unself-conscious joy. 21 days of believing that maybe, impossibly, they had escaped the gravity of the past. Amora should have known better. She noticed the change in Dante first. The way his phone rang more frequently, pulling him from dinner, from their bed, from moments he would have protected before. The way his jaw tightened when he read certain messages. The way his men started appearing more often, their faces grim, their conversations held in hushed tones behind closed doors. Something was wrong. He wouldn't tell her what, but she felt it in the air, thick and suffocating, like smoke before fire. "Is everything all right?" she asked one morning, watching him dress for the day. His movements were sharp, efficient, controlled in the way they only were when he was preparing for something. "Just business," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that covered storms. "Dante." She sat up in bed, pulling the sheet around herself. "Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after everything." He paused, his hand on his tie. For a moment, she thought he would deflect again. But then he sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. "There's been movement," he said carefully. "From rivals. They are testing boundaries, seeing if the peace we've had holds or breaks." "What does that mean for us?" "It means I need to be more careful, more vigilant. But you're safe here, Amora. You and Lily. This house is the most protected place in the city. But you're not always in this house." His expression tightened. "No, I'm not." Fear, cold and familiar, slithered through her chest. "Then don't leave. Stay here. Let someone else handle." "I can't." Dante cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I can't hide. If I show weakness, if I retreat, they'll see it as an opening. And openings get people killed." His eyes held hers, intense and unyielding. "I will protect you, no matter what it costs. But I need you to trust me." Amara wanted to argue, wanted to beg him to choose safety over pride, to choose her and Lily over whatever power he was protecting. But she understood, with sinking certainty, that Dante's world didn't work that way. In his world, showing weakness was surrender, and surrender meant death. "I trust you," she whispered, even though her heart was screaming. He kissed her, hard and deep, as if he could press promises into her skin. Then he left, and Amara sat alone in their bed, feeling the warmth of where he'd been and the cold of where he was going. The days grew tense. Dante came home later, sometimes not at all. When he did appear, he was exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tension in every line of his body. He would hold her and Lily close, as if trying to memorize them, as if preparing for loss. Amara tried to maintain normalcy for Lily's sake. They had lessons. They played in the garden. They read stories before bed. But her daughter was perceptive. She noticed when Dante missed dinner. Noticed the way Amara's smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. "Is Dad okay?" Lily asked one night, snuggled against Amara's side. "He's working very hard," Amara said, smoothing her daughter's hair. "But he loves you very much. That never changes." "Will he come back soon?" "Always. He always comes back to us." But even as she said it, Amara felt the lie in her throat. Because she knew, with terrible certainty, that one day Dante might not come back. That the life he lived demanded price, and that price could be paid in blood. She started sleeping poorly. Every sound made her jolt awake. Every car on the drive made her heart race. She would get up and check on Lily, then stand at the window, staring at the gates, waiting for headlights that sometimes didn't come until dawn. If your heart's racing too, take a breath. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more unforgettable love stories. One night, Dante came home bleeding. It was after midnight. Amara was in the library, unable to sleep, when she heard the front door open. She rushed into the foyer and found him standing there, his shirt torn, blood seeping through the fabric at his side. "Dante," her voice broke. "It's not bad." He held up a hand to stop her from panicking. Looks worse than it is. Just a graze. You're bleeding. I've had worse. That wasn't comforting. Amara crossed to him, her hand shaking, and carefully lifted his shirt. The wound was a slash across his ribs, not deep, but angry and raw. Tears blurred her vision. Let me get Maria. Or, we should go to the hospital. No hospitals. Dante caught her wrist gently. Maria can handle it. She's done it before. Of course she had, because this was Dante's life. Getting hurt, coming home bleeding, acting like it was normal. Maria appeared, summoned by some invisible signal, carrying a medical kit. She worked quickly and efficiently, cleaning the wound, stitching it closed, bandaging it with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this too many times. Dante barely flinched, just watched Amara's face, concern for her evident even through his own pain. When Maria finished and left them alone, Amara finally let the tears fall. This is what it's going to be like, isn't it? You leaving. Coming back hurt. Or maybe not coming back at all. Dante pulled her into his arms, careful of his injury. I'm here. I'm alive. That's what matters. For how long? The question came out broken. How long before your luck runs out? Before I have to explain to Lily why her father isn't coming home? Amora. Don't tell me not to think about it. Don't tell me I'm overreacting. This is real, Dante. This is your life. And now it's mine too. Mine and Lily's. And I don't know how to live like this. I don't know how to watch you walk out that door every day not knowing if you'll walk back in. Dante's jaw tightened. What do you want me to do? I can't stop being who I am. I can't stop protecting what's mine. If I show weakness, if I back down, everything I've built crumbles. And when it crumbles, you and Lily get hurt. That's not acceptable. And you getting killed is. I'm not going to get killed. You don't know that. Yes, I do. His voice was hard now, Satan. Because I have too much to live for. I have you. I have Lily. I have a reason to be careful. To be smart. To come home every night. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. I will not leave you. I promise you that. Amora wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But promises felt so fragile against the reality of blood on his shirt and the violence waiting beyond these walls. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm so scared of losing you. Then we even. Dante's thumb brushed away her tears. Because I'm terrified of losing you too. Every second you out of my sight. Every moment I'm not here protecting you. That fear is what keeps me alive, Amora. It makes me faster, smarter, more ruthless. Because I cannot, will not, let anything happen to you. They held each other in the dim foyer, both bleeding in their own ways, both terrified of a future they couldn't control. And Amora understood, finally, what it meant to love someone dangerous. It meant carrying fear like a second heartbeat. It meant living with the knowledge that tomorrow wasn't promised. It meant choosing love anyway, despite the cost. Promise me something, she said against his chest. Anything. Promise me you'll fight to come back. Every time. No matter what. I promise. And promise me that if something happens, if the worst happens, you'll make sure Lily and I are taken care of. That we'll be safe. Dante pulled back to look at her. Nothing is going to happen. Promise me anyway. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. You'll be taken care of. I've made arrangements. Documents. Accounts. People who will protect you if I can't. But it won't come to that, Amora. I swear to you. She nodded, trying to find comfort in his certainty even though her heart knew better. The world didn't care about promises. It took what it wanted when it wanted, and no amount of planning could stop fate when it decided to strike. That night, they made love with a desperation that bordered on grief, as if they could hold off tomorrow by losing themselves in the present. as if bodies pressed together could build walls strong enough to keep the world out. And afterward, Amara lay awake, listening to Dante's breathing, mimicking the weight of him beside her, because she knew, with the terrible clarity of premonition, that their time was running out. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here, circling, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when it did, everything they'd built, every promise, every hope, every fragile moment of happiness, would be tested in ways neither of them was ready for. But for now, in the dark, with Dante's heartbeat steady against her palm, Amara let herself pretend. Let herself believe in forever, even if forever was a lie. Because sometimes lying to yourself was the only way to survive until morning. The attack came on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were supposed to be safe, ordinary. The day Lily had art lessons with Maria. The day Amara usually spent in the garden, reading, letting the sun warm her face and pretend, just for a moment, that their life was normal. But normal was a fiction, and fictions shattered easily. Amara was in the library when the first explosion rocked the house. The windows rattled. Books fell from shelves. Her coffee cup shattered on the floor. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what had just happened. Then instinct kicked in. Lily! She was running before she knew she'd moved, tearing through the house, her heart in her throat. Lily! Maria appeared in the hallway. Lily clutched against her chest. Her daughter was crying, terrified but unhurt. Relief flooded Amara so completely she nearly collapsed. Mama! I've got you, baby. I've got you. Amara took Lily from Maria, holding her tight, feeling her small body shake. You're okay. You're okay. Another explosion. Closer this time. The house shuddered. Alarms began to wail. And then men were everywhere. Dante's security team, moving with military precision, weapons drawn, voices sharp with commands. Elena appeared, her face grim. We need to move you. Now. What's happening? We're under attack. Multiple points. They breached the outer perimeter. Elena's hand was already on Amara's arm, pulling her toward the back of the house. Dante's on his way, but we can't wait. We need to get you to the safe room. The safe room. Dante had shown it to her once, weeks ago, when she'd insisted on knowing every contingency plan. It was buried deep beneath the house, reinforced steel, its own ventilation system, communication equipment. A tomb designed to keep them alive. They moved quickly, down hallways Amara had walked 1,000 times but which now felt foreign, dangerous. Maria stayed close, her face pale but determined. Lily cried into Amara's neck, and Amara whispered lies about how everything would be fine, how Daddy would be here soon, how they were just playing a game. Gunfire erupted somewhere above them. Sharp, rapid, unmistakable. Elena swore and quickened their pace. They reached the hidden door, disguised as a section of wall in the wine cellar, and Elena punched in the code with shaking fingers. The door slid open, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. Inside, now. Amara hesitated. Where's Dante? He's coming. But you need to be secure first. That's protocol. I'm not leaving without. You are. Elena's voice was hard. Because if something happens to you, it will destroy him. And we need him focused. So get in the goddamn safe room, Amara. It was the first time Elena had used her name. The first time she'd shown anything close to emotion. And it was that more than the words that made Amara move. They descended. The door sealed behind them with a hydraulic hiss. The lights came on automatically, revealing a space that was surprisingly comfortable. Beds, supplies, a small bathroom, monitors showing security feeds from all over the property. On those monitors, Amara could see the battle unfolding. Men in tactical gear storming the grounds. Dante's security fighting back. Muzzle flashes in the dark. Bodies falling. And somewhere in that chaos was Dante. Can you reach him? Amara asked Elena, her voice barely steady. Elena was already on the communication system, speaking rapidly in code Amara didn't understand. She waited, tension screaming through every nerve. Finally, Elena turned back. He's alive, engaging hostiles on the east wing. He says to stay here, no matter what. Don't open this door for anyone but him. Amara nodded numbly. She sat on one of the beds, still holding Lily, rocking her gently. Maria sat beside her, taking Lily's hand, murmuring softly in Spanish. Prayers, Amara realized. Maria was praying. Time became meaningless. Minutes felt like hours. The sounds of fighting filtered through the walls, muffled but constant. On the monitors, Amara watched the battle rage. Watched men die. Watched the estate she'd come to think of as safe turn into a war zone. And she waited for Dante. Prayed he would come through that door. Prayed she wouldn't see him fall on one of those screens. Before we close this chapter, take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Every small gesture helps the next story find its way to you. An hour passed. The gunfire grew sporadic, then stopped. Silence fell, heavy and ominous. Elena was on the communication system again, getting updates. Her expression gave nothing away. Professional. Cold. But Amara saw the way her knuckles whitened on the radio. Status. Amara demanded. Hostiles neutralized. Perimeter secured. Casualties on both sides. Elena's voice was flat. Dante's team is doing a sweep, making sure there are no stragglers. And Dante? Still alive. Still alive. Not fine. Not unhurt. Just alive. That distinction told Amara everything she needed to know. I want to see him. Not until it's clear. Elena. Not until it's clear, Elena repeated, harder this time. We don't know if there are secondary threats. We don't know if they left traps. We wait until Dante himself gives the all clear. That's protocol. Amara wanted to scream, wanted to tear through that door and find him herself. But Lily was still in her arms, finally asleep, exhausted from fear. And Amara couldn't risk her daughter, couldn't put her in danger because she needed to see with her own eyes that Dante was alive. So she waited, and the waiting was its own kind of torture. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the communication system crackled. Dante's voice came through, rough and strained. Elena, status on my family. Elena's shoulders sagged with relief. Safe, unharmed, waiting for you. I'm coming down. 5 minutes later, the door opened, and Dante stepped through. He looked like he'd been through hell. His face was streaked with smoke and dirt. His clothes were torn and blood-stained, some his, some not. There was a cut above his eye, still bleeding, and he moved carefully, as if every step hurt. But he was alive. Whole. Here. Amara handed Lily to Maria and crossed to him in 3 steps. She didn't say anything, just pressed herself against his chest and felt his arms come around her, solid and real. You're okay, she whispered. You're okay. I promised I'd come back. His voice was rough, exhausted. I always come back. They stood like that, holding each other, while Maria took Lily to one of the beds and Elena coordinated with the team above. And Amara let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The fear, the relief, the bone-deep terror of how close they'd come to losing everything. What happened? She finally asked. Dante pulled back to look at her. Coordinated attack. They knew our security patterns, our weak points. Someone fed them information. Amara's blood ran cold. Someone inside. We investigating. But yes, I think so. His jaw tightened, fury barely contained. Someone betrayed us, and when I find out who, they'll wish they'd died in the attack. It was the most violent she'd ever heard him, the most dangerous, and instead of being frightened, Amara felt a savage satisfaction, because someone had threatened her daughter, had threatened Lily, and she wanted them to pay for that. How many did we lose? She asked quietly. 4 of my men. Good men. Men with families. Dante's expression was carved from stone. Their families will be taken care of. I'll make sure of it. And the attackers? All dead. They should have been something to say to that. Some expression of horror or grief. But Amora felt nothing. These men had come to hurt her family, and now they were gone. That was justice. Cold and simple and absolute. What happens now? She asked. Dante looked at her, his dark eyes steady despite the exhaustion. Now we find who hired them, who gave them our information, and we make sure this never happens again. Can you do that? Can you make us safe? I'll die trying. That wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was the only one he could give, because in Dante's world, absolute safety didn't exist. There were only degrees of risk, and the constant, exhausting work of staying ahead of the threats. They stayed in the safe room for 6 more hours while Dante's team swept every inch of the property, disarmed hidden explosives, cleared the bodies, secured the perimeter, and when they finally emerged into the house, Amara barely recognized it. Bullet holes in the walls, shattered windows, blood on the marble floors. The beautiful estate had been turned into a battlefield, and standing in the ruins of what had been her sanctuary, Amara felt something inside her harden. This was the reality of loving Dante. Not the beautiful moments, not the safety and comfort, but this, violence and blood and the constant threat of loss. She'd known it intellectually, but now she knew it in her bones. In the way Lily's hand clutched hers, trembling. In the way Dante moved through the house with military efficiency, assessing damage, giving orders, already planning repairs and increased security. This was their life now, and it would never be peaceful, never be simple, never be safe. But as Dante crossed back to her, his hand reaching for hers, pulling her close despite the doubt and blood and exhaustion, Amara made her choice again. She would stay. She would live with the fear. She would protect her daughter and love this dangerous man and fight for every moment of happiness they could steal. Because the alternative, a life without him, without this love, without this family, was worse than any threat that could come through those gates. She had found something worth fighting for, worth dying for, if it came to that, and she would not let it go without a battle. The days after the attack passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Dante barely slept. He spent hours in the control room, reviewing footage, interrogating his people, hunting for the betrayal that had nearly cost him everything. Amara watched him burn himself down to ashes in pursuit of answers, and she didn't know how to stop him. She didn't know if she should. Because Dante was right. Someone had betrayed them. And until that person was found, none of them were safe. The house was being rebuilt around them. Contractors worked day and night, replacing windows, patching walls, erasing evidence of violence with fresh paint and new stone. But the scars remained. Lily had nightmares now. She woke crying most nights, and Amara would hold her and sing soft songs until she fell back asleep. And every morning, Lily would ask the same question, "Are the bad men coming back?" "No, baby," Amara would lie. "Daddy made sure they can't come back." But even Lily, at 6 years old, could sense the lie. 1 week after the attack, Dante found the traitor. His name was Marcus. Not Amara's Marcus, a different one, a guard who'd been with Dante for 3 years. Trusted, liked, apparently in debt to the wrong people and desperate enough to sell information to rival families in exchange for debt forgiveness. Dante had him brought to the estate, to the room where he dealt with betrayals. The room Amara had never seen and had no desire to see. But she knew what happened there. Could read it in the grim set of Dante's jaw when he emerged hours later, blood on his hands that he washed carefully in the sink while Amara watched from the bathroom doorway. "Is it done?" she asked quietly. Dante nodded. He didn't elaborate, didn't offer details, and Amara didn't ask, because she understood, with cold certainty, that Marcus the guard no longer existed, that Dante had done what needed to be done, what his world demanded. And part of her, a part she didn't recognize and wasn't sure she liked, was glad. "I'm sorry you had to do that," she said. Dante looked at her, surprise flickering across his exhausted face. You're not horrified. I should be. Amara crossed to him, took the towel from his hands, and dried them herself. Maybe I would have been, before. But that man almost got Lily killed. Almost got you killed. So no, I'm not horrified. I'm grateful. She met his eyes. Is that wrong? I don't know anymore. Dante's voice was raw. I don't know what's right or wrong. I just know what I have to do to keep you safe. And I'll do it. Every time. Without hesitation. Amara pulled him into her arms. He was taller, broader, stronger, but in that moment, he felt fragile. Like a man holding himself together by force of will alone. You don't have to do this alone, she whispered. This burden. This weight. I'm here. Let me help carry it. You shouldn't have to. But I want to. She pulled back to look at him. We're in this together, Dante. Your battles are my battles. Your choices are my choices. I knew what I was signing up for when I married you, and I don't regret it. Something in Dante's expression cracked. Relief, maybe, or gratitude, or just the exhaustion of trying to be strong for so long. He pressed his forehead to hers and breathed, I don't deserve you. Probably not, Amara agreed, a sad smile touching her lips. But you're stuck with me anyway. He laughed, a broken sound that held no humor. And they stood like that, holding each other in the bathroom, while the house was rebuilt around them and the world waited, patient and predatory, for its next chance to strike. Security doubled after that. New guards, all personally vetted by Dante. New protocols, new systems. The estate became a fortress, impenetrable and suffocating in equal measure. Lily wasn't allowed outside anymore, not even into the garden. It was too exposed, Dante said. Too risky. So she played in the hallways instead, her laughter echoing through the house like a ghost of the freedom she'd had before. Amora watched her daughter adapt and felt her heart break. This wasn't the life she'd wanted for Lily. This wasn't the childhood she'd dreamed of giving her. Safety, yes. Protection, yes. But also isolation. Confinement. A beautiful cage that grew smaller every day. We can't live like this forever, she told Dante one night. They were in his study, the door locked, speaking in the low tones of people who'd learned that walls had ears. Lily needs to be a child. To play. To see the sky. She can see the sky from the windows. That's not the same, and you know it. Dante's jaw tightened. What do you want me to do, Amora? Risk her. Risk you. I almost lost you once. I won't go through that again. I'm not asking you to be careless. I'm asking you to find balance. There has to be a middle ground between complete exposure and complete lockdown. Not in my world. Dante's voice was hard. In my world, you're either protected or you're vulnerable. There's no middle ground. Amora felt frustration rise, hot and sharp. Then maybe we need to leave your world. The words hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Dante stared at her. What? Leave. All of us. Disappear. Go somewhere they can't find us. Start over. Amora. I'm serious, Dante. We could do it. You have resources. Connections. We could go somewhere remote. Somewhere safe. Live quietly. Normally. Let Lily have a childhood. And what happens when they find us? Dante's voice was cold now. Controlled. Because they would find us eventually. And when they did, we'd be alone. Unprotected. At their mercy. Is that what you want? I want my daughter to stop having nightmares. I want to stop living in fear. I want, her voice broke. I want the life you promised me. The safe one. The happy one. Dante crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. I am trying to give you that. I'm doing everything I can. I know, but it's not enough. Tears slid down her cheeks. It's never going to be enough, is it? Because your world doesn't allow for happy endings. It only allows for survival. Dante had no answer for that. Because she was right. They both knew it. If stories like this linger in your heart long after they end, don't leave just yet. Like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below, and let the next story find you when the night grows quiet again. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She stood at the window, staring out at the grounds that had become their prison. In the distance, she could see guards patrolling, cameras watching, the machinery of protection that never rested, and she wondered if this was all there was, if she'd traded one kind of cage for another, if safety was just another word for trapped. She thought about leaving, really leaving, taking Lily and disappearing while Dante slept. She could do it, could find a way, could vanish into the world and hope they'd never be found. But even as the thought formed, she knew she wouldn't. Because leaving Dante would be like cutting out her own heart. And because, despite everything, she still believed he was their best chance at survival. So she stayed at the window, watching the night, while behind her Dante dreamed fitful dreams of battles he couldn't win and threats he couldn't stop. And in the morning, they would wake and pretend that everything was fine, that they were safe, that love was enough. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. Love wasn't enough. Not in a world built on violence. Not against enemies who wanted them dead. Not when safety demanded sacrifices neither of them knew how to make. And somewhere, in the dark spaces between hope and resignation, Amara felt something inside her begin to shift, to harden, to accept that if she wanted her family to survive, she couldn't just be the protected one, the rescued one, the one who waited behind locked doors while others fought her battles. She needed to become something else, something stronger, something dangerous enough to stand beside Dante instead of behind him. She didn't know if that transformation would save them or destroy what was left of her soul, but she was beginning to suspect it was the only way forward. The change in Amara didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, a slow hardening, like clay in a kiln. Each day of confinement, each night my Lily had, each moment of watching Dante carry the weight alone, it all pressed down on her until something inside crystallized into something new. She started asking questions. About Dante's business, about the families he dealt with, about the power structures and alliances that governed his world. At first, he deflected, tried to shield her from the darkness, but Amara was persistent. If I'm going to live in this world, she told him firmly, I need to understand it, all of it. So Dante taught her, reluctantly at first, then with growing respect as he realized she wasn't naive. Wasn't flinching. She absorbed information like she'd once absorbed coffee orders and shift schedules, with sharp attention and strategic thinking. She learned about territories, about tribute and protection rackets, about the delicate balance of power that kept the city's underworld from collapsing into open war. She learned about alliances forged through blood and marriage, about codes of conduct that were both brutal and bizarrely honorable. And she learned about the people who wanted Dante dead, the rival families who saw his power as a threat, the ambitious underbosses who thought they could take what he'd built, the old guard who resented his influence. There are three main threats right now, Dante explained one evening, spreading out a map of the city on his desk. The Volkov family to the north. They've been testing our boundaries since the attack. The Giordano family to the east, old blood, traditional, they hate that I'm more powerful than them. And the Costianos to the south. They are wild cards, unpredictable, dangerous. Amora studied the map. What stops them from working together? From uniting against you? Fear, greed, distrust. Dante's smile was cold. They hate me, but they hate each other more. The moment they start cooperating is the moment my world collapses. Then we make sure they keep hating each other. Dante looked at her sharply. Amora met his gaze. I'm not content to hide anymore, Dante. I want to help. Let me. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. Tell me what you're thinking. She felt something ignite in her chest. Purpose, agency, the power that came from being part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Information, she said. That's what almost killed us. Someone knowing too much about our security. So we need to know more about theirs. We need sources, eyes in places they think are safe. I have people for that. Men. Amora leaned forward. Big, obvious men who stand out, who make people nervous. But women are invisible. We serve drinks. We clean houses. We're everywhere and no one sees us as threats. Dante's eyes widened slightly. You want to recruit? Domestics, service workers, the people who are in their homes, in their offices, who hear things they're not supposed to hear. Amora's mind was racing now, pieces falling into place. Pay them well. Protect them. Give them a reason to be loyal to you instead of whoever they're currently working for. Build a network they'll never see coming. A slow smile spread across Dante's face. You're brilliant. I'm practical, and I'm tired of being helpless. They started small, identifying key households, offering employment to women who worked for rival families. The pitch was simple: better pay, better protection, and the respect they'd never gotten from their current employers. Most said yes within minutes. Within a month, Amora had built a network of 20 women, housekeepers and nannies and personal assistants, women who had access to private conversations and confidential documents, who could report back on movements and meetings and plans. And suddenly, Dante had information he'd never had before. Warning of plots before they materialized. Knowledge of alliances before they were formalized. The kind of intelligence that let him stay 3 steps ahead of his enemies. You're changing the game, he told her one night, or in his voice. Fundamentally changing how this works. Amora felt a dark satisfaction. Good. They came after my daughter. Now they'll learn what that costs. She was becoming someone new. Someone she didn't entirely recognize. The woman who'd waited tables and hidden from debt collectors felt like a past life. This version of herself was harder, sharper, willing to do what was necessary, and it should have frightened her. This transformation, this acceptance of violence as a tool. But instead, it felt like power, like taking control of a life that had always controlled her. Lily noticed the change too. Mama's different, she told Maria one afternoon. Amora overheard from the hallway. She's not scared anymore. Is that good or bad? Maria asked gently. Lily thought about it. Good, I think. But also, I miss when she smiled more. The words cut through Amora like a blade. She stood in the hallway, listening to her daughter's honest observation, and felt shame wash over her. In becoming stronger, had she become colder? In protecting Lily, was she losing the warmth that made her a good mother? That night, after tucking Lily in, Amora sat on the edge of her daughter's bed and stroked her hair. I'm sorry if I haven't been myself lately, baby. Lily looked up at her with those wide, trusting eyes. It's okay, Mama. I know you're trying to keep us safe, like Dad does. That doesn't mean I should stop being your mom. The mom who plays with you and laughs with you and makes everything feel okay. You still do that. Lily reached up and touched Amora's face. You're just braver now, like a queen in the stories. Queens have to be strong, but they still love their kingdoms. Amora's throat tightened. You're my whole kingdom, you know that. I know. Lily smiled. And Dad is the king. And we're all safe because you protect each other. Out of the mouths of children. Amora kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered promises about tomorrow, about playing games and reading stories and remembering how to be light even in the darkness. But when she left Lily's room and found Dante in their bedroom, she felt the weight settle back over her shoulders. The responsibility, the constant vigilance, the knowledge that one mistake could cost them everything. She thinks I've changed, Amora said, leaning against the doorframe. Dante looked up from the documents he'd been reviewing. You have changed. Does that worry you? He set the papers aside and crossed to her. No, it makes me love you more. His hands found her waist, pulling her close. You're not a victim anymore, Amora. You're a partner, an equal. You stand beside me instead of behind me. That's not something to mourn. But what if I lose myself in this? What if I become so hard, so focused on survival, that I forget how to be human? Dante's expression softened. You won't, because you have something I didn't have for a long time. You have love that isn't conditional. You have Lily. She keeps you grounded, reminds you what you're fighting for. He pressed his forehead to hers. And you have me, and I will always remind you who you are, who you were before this, who you'll be after. After. Amora pulled back to look at him. You think there's an after? An end to this? I have to believe that. Have to believe that one day we'll have peace. Real peace. That Lily will grow up and we'll grow old and this will all be a memory. His voice grew quieter. I have to believe that, or I'll go insane. Amora understood. Hope was the only thing that made survival bearable. Without it, they were just going through motions, waiting for the inevitable. Then let's make it happen, she said firmly. Let's not just survive. Let's win. Let's build something so secure, so powerful, that no one would dare threaten us again. Dante studied her face, and she saw the moment he truly understood what she was proposing. Not defense. Offense. Not just protection. Domination. That means escalation, he said carefully. That means making moves that will paint targets on our backs. We already have targets on our backs. At least this way, we're the ones pulling the trigger. A slow smile spread across Dante's face. It wasn't kind. It wasn't gentle. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. All right then. Let's go to war. They planned for weeks, coordinating with Amora's network, identifying weak points in rival families, building alliances with smaller organizations who resented the major players. It was a chess game played with lives and loyalties, and Amora discovered she had a talent for it. She could read people, could identify what they wanted, what they feared, what they'd sacrifice, and she used that knowledge ruthlessly, building a coalition that would shift the balance of power in the city. The first move came on a cold November night. The Volkov family had a shipment coming in, weapons, expensive and illegal. Dante's intelligence said it would arrive at the docks at midnight. Heavily guarded, supposedly untouchable. But Amora's network had provided something invaluable. The exact route, the timing, the number of guards and their positions. Everything Dante needed to execute a perfect ambush. You don't have to watch this, Dante told her as they prepared to leave. You can stay here. Wait for me to come back. Amora shook her head. I'm coming with you. Amora. I'm the one who got you this information. I need to see it through. And, she met his eyes. I need to stop being afraid. I need to see your world, really see it, if I'm going to survive in it. Dante looked like he wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her face and nodded. Stay in the car. Stay with Elena, no matter what happens. She agreed, but they both knew she was crossing a line. Once she witnessed violence, once she saw what Dante's protection actually meant, there would be no going back to ignorance. The docks were dark and cold, the water black as oil. Dante's team was already in position, hidden in shadows, waiting. Amora sat in the back seat of the car with Elena, watching through tinted windows as headlights appeared in the distance. The Volkov convoy. 3 trucks, just as predicted. Guards on motorcycles flanking them. Confident, unsuspecting. Dante's voice came through Elena's radio. On my mark. Amora's heart pounded. This was real. This was happening. And she had helped make it happen. Mark. Everything erupted at once. Dante's men emerged from hiding. Gunfire split the night. The motorcycles went down first, guards falling before they could react. The trucks tried to scatter but found their routes blocked, boxed in by vehicles that appeared from nowhere. It was over in minutes. Brutal, efficient, decisive, and in the aftermath, as Dante's team secured the shipment and rounded up survivors for interrogation, Amara sat in the car and felt nothing. No horror, no revulsion, just cold satisfaction that the plan had worked, that they'd struck first and struck hard. "Ah, you all right?" Elena asked quietly. Amara realized she was smiling. A small, dark smile. "Yes," she said. "I am." And she meant it. When Dante returned to the car, he was covered in someone else's blood. He opened the door and looked at her, searching her face for signs of trauma or regret. Instead, he found only certainty. "It worked perfectly," she said. "Your team was incredible. Because of your intelligence." Dante's voice held a mixture of pride and concern. "You made this possible." "I know." Amora reached out and took his blooded hand. "And I'd do it again." Something passed between them in that moment. An understanding. They weren't just husband and wife anymore. They were partners in something darker. Something necessary. Something that would either save them or damn them completely. "I love you," Dante said. "Even if this destroys us both, I love you." "It won't destroy us." Amora's grip tightened on his hand. "Because we won't let it. We're stronger than they are. Smarter. More ruthless when we need to be." "When did you become this person?" "The moment they threatened my family." Her voice was steel. "They made me this way, and now they'll pay for it." They drove back to the estate as dawn broke over the city, and Amara watched the sunrise and felt something shift inside her permanently. She had crossed a line tonight, had become complicit in violence, had stopped being the woman who ran and become the woman who fought back. There was no returning to innocence, no pretending she was just a victim of circumstances. She had made choices, active, deliberate choices to be part of Dante's world, to use his methods, to accept that sometimes survival required blood. And the most terrifying part was that she didn't regret it, not even a little bit. Ted and furious, struck back with a precision that suggested they'd been planning it for weeks. A bomb at one of Dante's legitimate businesses. 3 employees killed. Dozens injured. A message written in blood and rubble. Asterisk, you started this. We'll finish it. Asterisk. Dante stood in the ruins of the building, his face carved from stone. Amara watched him absorb the devastation, the loss of innocent lives, the weight of choices that led here. And she felt the guilt press down on both of them. "This is my fault," she whispered. "The docks. If we hadn't—" "No." Dante's voice cut through her spiral. "This is their fault. They chose to be our enemies. They chose to threaten our family. Every consequence that follows is on them." But even as he said it, Amara could see the cracks in his certainty. 3 people were dead. People who'd had nothing to do with their war. Collateral damage in a conflict they hadn't asked to be part of. "Their families," Amara said. "We take care of them. Financially, whatever they need. Education for their children. Everything." Dante nodded. "Already arranged. But it doesn't bring them back." "No, it doesn't." They stood in the wreckage together, 2 people who'd thought they understood the cost of power but were only now beginning to truly comprehend it. Violence begat violence. Every action rippled outward in ways they couldn't control. "We can still stop," Dante said quietly. "Call a meeting. Negotiate peace. The Volkovs would accept it if we offered favorable terms." Amara looked at him. "Do you want to stop?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I want you and Lily to be safe. If stopping achieves that, then yes. But will it? Or will backing down now just show weakness? Make us targets for the next family who wants to test us?" Dante's jaw tightened. "I don't know anymore. I used to be certain about these things. Used to see the world in clear lines. But you've changed how I think. Made me question whether the old ways are the only ways." "Then let's find a new way." Amora took his hand. "Not surrender. Not escalation. Something else. Something they won't expect. What emerged over the next weeks was unprecedented in the city's underworld. Amara, using her network and her outsider's perspective, began reaching out not to the bosses but to their families, to the wives and mothers and sisters who had no official power but held significant influence behind the scenes. She hosted quiet meetings, afternoon teas in neutral locations, conversations between women who understood the cost of their men's wars because they were the ones who buried the dead and comforted the grieving. "We're tired," Sofia Volkov told her during their second meeting. She was elegant, educated, nothing like the cold warrior Amara had imagined. "My husband postures and threatens because that's what's expected. But I've lost a brother, 2 cousins, and my eldest son to this life. I don't want to lose more." "Then help me stop it," Amara said. "Not through surrender. Through restructuring. Through creating something better than what we have now." It was radical. It was risky. And it required convincing the most powerful women in the city that they had more to gain from peace than from continued conflict. But slowly, impossibly, it worked. The women began to pressure their husbands, to withhold support for military actions, to advocate for negotiation over violence. And because these men, for all their power, still listened to the women they loved, things began to shift. Dante watched Amara orchestrate this transformation with something like awe. "You're doing what I couldn't do in 20 years. You're changing the rules of the game itself." "Because I'm not playing by the old rules," Amara said. "I'm making new ones." The summit happened in March. 6 months after the attack on the estate. 6 months of careful maneuvering and relationship building and quiet diplomacy conducted in living rooms and over coffee instead of in boardrooms and through intermediaries. All the major families gathered, not in some warehouse or abandoned building, but in a hotel conference room. Their wives insisted, demanded, and the men, caught off guard by this unprecedented united front from their women, reluctantly agreed. Dante gave the opening speech, but it was Amara who truly led the negotiations. She spoke not about territory or tribute, but about sustainability, about building something that could last generations instead of burning out in a single lifetime of violence. "We're all tired," she said, looking around the room at faces hardened by decades of conflict. "Tired of funerals, tired of looking over our shoulders. Tired of sacrificing our children's childhoods to security protocols and paranoia. So let's try something different. Let's build a structure where we can all prosper without destroying each other." It wasn't easy. There were arguments, threats, moments when violence seemed inevitable. But the women in the room, present for the first time in such a meeting, held firm. And slowly, grudgingly, a new accord took shape. Territory would be respected. Conflicts would be mediated through a council instead of through blood. Families would specialize instead of compete. One family controlling ports, another construction, another finance. Cooperation instead of conquest. "This won't hold," Viktor Volkov said, even as he signed the agreement. "Someone will break it. Someone always does." "Then we'll deal with them," Amara said calmly. "Together. United. That's the agreement. Anyone who breaks the peace faces all of us." It was a gamble. A massive, terrifying gamble. But as the families left that conference room with a signed accord, Amara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, tangible hope that maybe they'd found a way forward. That maybe violence wasn't the only answer. That maybe, just maybe, they could build something better. Dante pulled her into his arms the moment they were alone. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it," Amara corrected. "You gave me the platform. The credibility. I just used it differently than anyone expected." "You're remarkable." He kissed her, deep and thorough, and terrifying, and absolutely perfect. Amora laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. Does this mean we can finally breathe? Can finally live without constant threat? If the accord holds, yes. Dante's expression grew serious. But you understand what you've become now, don't you? You're not just my wife anymore. You're a power player in your own right. The families will come to you. We'll seek your counsel. We'll see you as someone who can make or break their futures. Amora considered that. The weight of it, the responsibility. A year ago, she'd been a waitress hiding from debt collectors. Now she was negotiating peace accords between crime families. The transformation was dizzying. Can I handle that? She asked honestly. You already have been. Dante cupped her face. You're stronger than you know, Amara. Stronger than I ever was. Because you have something I never did. You have perspective. You remember what it's like to be powerless. That makes you careful with power in a way I never learned to be. That night, they made love with a gentleness that had been missing for months. No desperation. No urgency. Just two people reconnecting after surviving a war. And afterward, lying in Dante's arms, Amara let herself believe that maybe, finally, they'd found peace. The weeks that followed were surreal. The accord held. Disputes were brought to the council. Violence decreased dramatically. And slowly, carefully, the city's underworld began to stabilize into something that resembled order. Lily started going outside again, playing in the garden under watchful but less anxious eyes. Her nightmares faded. Her laughter returned. And watching her daughter rediscover joy, Amara felt tears of relief stream down her face. We did it, she whispered to Dante one evening, watching Lily chase butterflies in the fading light. We actually gave her a childhood. You did that. Dante's arm wrapped around her waist. I just provided the means. You provided the vision. 3 months after the summit, on a warm June evening, Amara stood on the terrace where she'd stood so many times before. But this time, when she looked out at the grounds, she didn't see a prison. She saw a home. The gates were still there. The security was still present. But the feeling had changed. They were no longer hiding. No longer hunted. They were simply living. Dante joined her, carrying 2 glasses of wine. He handed her one and they stood together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Do you ever miss it? He asked. Your old life, before all this. Amora thought about it honestly. I miss the simplicity sometimes, the anonymity. But no, I don't miss being afraid. I don't miss feeling powerless. And I definitely don't miss not having you and Lily. Even with everything it cost? Everything you had to become. Especially because of what I became. Amora turned to face him. I'm not the broken woman you found in that diner anymore. I'm not someone things happen to. I'm someone who makes things happen. And yes, that came at a cost. But it also gave me power over my own life. That's worth everything. Dante smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. I love you, not despite who you've become. Because of it. I know. Amora leaned into him. And I love you, for seeing who I could be even when I couldn't see it myself. They stood like that as night fell, 2 people who'd found each other in darkness and somehow, against all odds, emerged into light. The road had been brutal. The cost had been high, but they'd survived, more than survived. They'd won. And in the quiet of that evening, with Lily's laughter drifting from inside the house and Dante's heartbeat steady against her cheek, Amora finally allowed herself to believe something she'd thought impossible. They were going to be okay. All of them. Time passed the way it does when life finally settles into rhythm. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. The accord held stronger than anyone expected. Conflicts arose, as they always did, but they were resolved through words instead of bullets, through negotiation instead of bodies. The city's underworld didn't become peaceful. It would never be that, but it became sustainable, predictable, and in that predictability, people found something they'd forgotten existed, the possibility of future. Lily turned 7, then 8. She started school, a private institution with security that rivaled the White House, but school nonetheless. She made friends. She brought home artwork and spelling tests and stories about playground drama that seemed absurdly normal given the family she belonged to. Amara watched her daughter grow and felt the last pieces of her fear finally crumble. Lily was going to be okay. Was going to have a life beyond survival. Was going to grow up with choices Amara had never had. And that, more than anything, made everything worthwhile. The women's network Amara had built evolved into something more formal. They met monthly, these wives and daughters and sisters of powerful men, and they discussed not just intelligence but initiatives. Education programs for children in their communities, support systems for families who'd lost members to violence, ways to build legitimacy and legacy instead of just wealth and power. "You're changing this world," Maria told her one afternoon. They were in the kitchen, preparing dinner together, a ritual they'd maintained even as Amara's responsibilities had grown, making it something worth passing down. "I'm trying," Amara said. "I don't know if it's enough. If it'll last." "It will." Maria's voice held certainty. "Because you built it on something other than fear. You built it on connection, on understanding that we're all in this together. That's stronger than any threat." Amara hoped she was right. Dante's businesses continued to thrive, but increasingly, he focused on the legitimate ones. The construction companies and import businesses and real estate ventures that didn't require constant vigilance. He was still powerful, still respected, still dangerous when he needed to be. But the edge of desperation had faded. He laughed more, spent more time with Lily, took Amara on actual dates where they didn't discuss territory or threats or strategies. They went to restaurants and museums and occasionally, when they felt particularly bold, to the theater. They were building a life, a real one, not just surviving but living. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd never met?" Amara asked one night. They were in bed, comfortable in the darkness, his arm around her shoulders. "If you hadn't walked into that diner." "Every day," Dante admitted. "I think about the woman you would have been. If you'd stayed small and afraid. If you'd never discovered the strength you had inside. I think about the man you would have become. If you'd never had someone to protect. If you'd never had a reason to want peace." "We saved each other," Dante said simply. "That's what I believe. Not me saving you or you saving me. Both of us pulling each other out of the darkness we were drowning in." Amara thought about that, about the woman she'd been, terrified and running and convinced she'd never be safe, about the man he'd been, powerful but isolated, protecting an empire that gave him everything except the one thing he'd actually wanted. Connection, family, love. "I'm glad you found me," she whispered. "So am I." On Lily's 9th birthday, they threw a party. A real party, with children from her school and decorations and a cake that said "Happy Birthday Princess Lily" in frosting. Security was present but discreet. And for a few hours, it felt like any other child's birthday party anywhere in the world. Amara watched Lily blow out her candles, watched her daughter's face light up with pure joy, and felt tears slide down her cheeks. Happy tears, grateful tears, the tears of someone who'd been given more than she'd ever hoped for. Dante appeared beside her, his hand finding hers. "She's beautiful, just like her mother. She's perfect, and she's safe. That's all I ever wanted." "You gave her more than safety." Dante squeezed her hand. "You gave her a future, hope, the belief that good things can happen even in dark places." Amora looked up at him. "We gave her that. Together." "Together," he agreed. That night, after the guests had left and Lily was asleep, surrounded by presents and still wearing her party dress because she'd refused to take it off, Amora and Dante sat on the terrace. It was the same spot where so many moments had happened, where she'd first agreed to stay, where he'd first told her he loved her, where they'd planned wars and negotiated peace, where they'd stood together through every crisis and every triumph. "I want to tell you something," Dante said. His voice was serious, and Amara felt her pulse quicken. What? I'm stepping back. Not completely. I'll still be involved. But I'm transitioning more of the day-to-day operations to people I trust. I want to spend more time with you and Lily. Want to be present for her childhood, not just her protector from a distance. Amara's heart swelled. Are you sure? Your empire will survive without me micromanaging every detail. That's what the Accord gave us. Stability, trust, the ability to delegate without constant fear of betrayal. He turned to face her fully. I've spent my entire adult life building power, and I'm not going to apologize for that. But I don't want to spend the next 20 years maintaining it at the cost of everything else. I want to be a husband, a father, a person who exists beyond his title. That's all I've ever wanted for you. I know. Dante smiled. You made it possible. By showing me there was more to life than control and conquest. By giving me something worth stepping back for. They kissed, soft and lingering, and Amara felt something settle inside her chest. A peace that went bone deep. They had fought so hard to get here. Had sacrificed and struggled and changed in ways that had nearly broken them. But they'd made it. Against all odds, they'd made it. The months continued to pass. Lily started 4th grade. Dante taught her to play chess, and she beat him for the first time on a rainy October afternoon. Amara's women's initiative expanded to other cities, other families, spreading the model of cooperation and long-term thinking. And slowly, carefully, the life they'd fought for became simply their life. Not a dream or a goal, but reality. Mornings and dinners and bedtimes. Arguments about homework and discussions about teenage boys in Lily's class and date nights where they talked about anything except business. Normal. Beautifully, miraculously normal. One evening, 2 years after the Accord, Amara found herself back on the terrace. Alone this time, just watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. From that diner where she'd been so afraid. Through the cage that had become a sanctuary. Through the transformation from victim to partner to power in her own right. She thought about the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. And she realized something that made her smile. She liked who she was now. Not despite the darkness she'd had to walk through, but because of it. Because surviving had taught her strength. Because love had taught her purpose. Because building something better than what existed had taught her that change was possible, even in the hardest places. Mama! Lily's voice came from behind her. Amara turned to find her daughter standing in the doorway, looking so much older than 9, so much more confident than Amara had ever been at that age. What's up, baby? I just wanted to tell you something. Lily crossed to her and took her hand. Mrs. Morrison asked us to write about our hero for school. About someone we admire. And who did you pick? You. Lily smiled. I wrote about you. About how you're brave and strong and you protect people. About how you make things better. About how you're my hero. Amara felt tears threaten. She knelt down so she was eye level with her daughter. You're my hero too, you know that? You're the reason I found the courage to be brave. The reason I fought so hard. Everything I did for you. I know. Lily hugged her. And I'm glad, because I have the best mom in the world. They stood like that, holding each other as the stars emerged overhead. And Dante appeared in the doorway, watching them with an expression of such complete contentment that Amara felt her heart might boast. This was what it had all been for. Not the power, not the victory, but this moment, this family, this love that had survived everything thrown at it. Amara reached out a hand to Dante, and he crossed to them, wrapping both of them in his arms. The 3 of them stood together on the terrace, and Amara let herself feel the full weight of what they'd built. A life, a real one, with all its complications and challenges and beautiful mundane moments. With safety that didn't require constant vigilance. With love that didn't have to be proven through sacrifice. Just life. Simple and complicated and absolutely perfect. I love you both, she whispered. more than anything in this world. We'll love you too, Dante said. And Lily echoed, so much. And standing there, held by the two people who meant everything, Amara felt something she'd thought she'd never feel again. Complete, whole, at peace. The past had been brutal. The journey had almost destroyed them. But they'd emerged on the other side, not just intact but stronger, not just surviving but thriving. And that, Amara thought as the first star appeared in the darkening sky, was the only happy ending that mattered. Not perfection, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of love strong enough to weather anything. The presence of family built on choice and commitment. The presence of peace earned through blood and tears, and the refusal to give up even when giving up seemed like the only option. They had made it, all three of them, together, and whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it the same way. Together, always together, forever. If stories like this linger in your heart long after they end, don't leave just yet. Like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below, and let the next story find you when the night grows quiet again.